Star of the show today, ripe bananas. Yum. Welcome back to the channel, YouTubers. Today I can't wait to show you the most fabulous wine you can make, banana wine. It's delicious, it's cheap, it's easy. Stay tuned, make sure you click the like and subscribe button.
Slow the road that you're on, keep it going. When the going gets rough, just remember how a heavenly dove.
And man, if you could smell these bananas, when this thing starts to ferment, your bubbler, your airlock is just going to go crazy. And you'll smell it all through the house. So what makes banana wine great to make? Number one, you can get it any time of the year. So you can make wine summer, fall, winter. One thing you want to make sure when you're making really any fruit wine, you want to try and make sure you're getting organic, because a lot of the fruits you're going to put in with the skins. And organic means obviously there's no chemicals added. So it makes a great wine. Anytime you can get organic, use that for any type of wine you might be making. So we're going to be making a 5-gallon batch of wine with these bananas. I have 18 pounds of bananas. That's what you'll need for this recipe. You want to make sure your bananas are fairly ripe. When you're starting to see spots like that and you're starting to smell them through the house, they're ripe enough to make your wine. So you got your bananas. Let's look at what you're going to need as far as ingredients to make this recipe and to make this banana wine. So let's go over some of the ingredients you're going to need. You're going to need some wine yeast, some Campden Tablets, some yeast nutrient, pectic enzyme, wine tannin, and acid blend. And don't forget, you will definitely need sugar to make wine. So let's get into some of the equipment you're going to need. You're definitely going to need some measuring spoons and measuring cups. I always like to keep a spray bottle handy. Especially for this banana wine, you're definitely going to need a mesh bag. You want to get as much of that pulp out as you can after the fermentation's done. You'll need a stir stick. We're going to stir this primary fermentation every day until it's complete. And definitely, you will need a fermentation bucket and some sanitizer. I've already got my equipment sanitized, so let's get this process started. And you definitely need one of these, a hydrometer. You want to be able to see what your alcohol level is after the primary fermentation is complete. Now, one thing you'll want to know when you're making banana wine, it does take some patience, because we're going to put this stuff in a mesh bag, and imagine this pulp, it's just going to literally disintegrate. So we may have to rack this wine more times than usual. So it does take a little more patience, but patience will pay off, I promise you, in this banana wine. So one of the first things we want to do is we want to get our sugar dissolved. So I got a 10-pound bag of sugar here. I've got about 1.5 gallons of water in a stock pot, which is about 6 quarts. So we're going to add the 10 pounds, which is what this recipe calls for, of the sugar. I'm going to try not to make too much of a mess here. So that's 10 pounds of sugar. We're going to heat this until it is dissolved. We don't want to boil it because we don't want to burn the sugar. So we'll keep stirring this, and once it just starts to begin to boil, not quite, we'll turn off the heat and we'll let this cool. So I'm still stirring it. You can see it's still cloudy. We want this to turn crystal clear. So you can see we're far from boiling to the point, but I'm seeing bubbles come off of the bottom, and we can see the bottom. And just by stirring here, I'm not scraping any sugar. So I know it's dissolved enough that we can turn off the heat and let this cool and wait till the next process. All right, so I wanted to give you a sample of what my process and setup looks like. So here is the Star San mixture that I've made a 2.5 gallon batch sitting with equipment soaking in there. This is what I use to sanitize the Star San. To make a 2.5 gallon batch, you need about 1/2 ounce of that. Watch my video. I give you a complete description of how to use that. I've already sanitized this bowl with that squirt bottle. So when I mixed up my sanitizer, I filled that squirt bottle up right away. You'll see me squirting equipment down. I've squirted this bowl, and then we come to the fruit. We're ready to get this stuff sliced up and start making wine. Okay, you can see I got my knife sanitized. I got my sanitizer here. I'm going to sanitize my cutting board so I can slice these bananas up. I'll just do both sides. And like I said, the bowl is sanitized. Again, if you're using Star San sanitizer, it is safe to drink this stuff as long as it's in the diluted form. So what we want to do with the bananas here, we're going to cut off both ends, and then we're going to slice these bananas in about 1/2 inch to inch pieces. We want to leave the skin on because, again, there's a lot of flavor there. And if you could smell it right now, it smells like bananas. So we'll just put these in our sanitized bowl. We'll go ahead and do all these bananas. And so you don't get bored, I'm gonna speed this up. Man, this is a lot of work. But as I finish my last 2 bananas, I'm gonna need a nap after this. Well, anyway, as I finish these last 2 bananas, just remember I did wash these bananas. You also want to do that. Any fruit wine you're gonna make, you want to wash your fruit before you actually use it. But when I said this wine is cheap to make, I think I paid like $6, $7 for all these bananas. So you do the math. This batch will make about 25 bottles. So it's cheap. You can't get any much cheaper wine than banana wine. Make sure you try this recipe. It's the only recipe you'll need for any fruit wine. It's the only one I ever use. Man, is that a lot of bananas or what? This is going to make a great batch of banana wine. I can't wait to try it. Of course, it will be a few months from now. So we got the bananas sliced. Let's get into the next process where we're going to get the fermentation bucket and get the chemicals added. All right, so we got our fermentation bucket. It's been sanitized. This is where I had the sanitizer in. So basically I moved the sanitizer to another bucket. So I'll be able to sanitize this equipment when I'm done. So let's start. We're going to start with the acid blend. We need 3 teaspoons of that. The next thing we're going to need is the yeast nutrient. We're going to need 4 teaspoons of that. My 1/2 teaspoon is the only one that's full fits in here, so I'm going to need 8 of these. The next thing we're going to need are our Campden tablets. And remember, we're making a 5-gallon batch, but I've got a 6-gallon bucket because I know we're going to be taking a lot of pulp out here. So I'm going to use 6 Campden tablets for this batch. And I like to use spoons to crush them up. Again, these spoons have been sanitized. Next thing we'll need is our wine tannin. We'll need 1.5 teaspoons of that. I've got some extra here, wine tannin, so I'm going to use this. 1.5 teaspoons. Next ingredient will be the pectic enzyme. We'll need 3 teaspoons of that for this recipe. Or 6.5 teaspoons. And that's it for our ingredients. What we'll do now is we'll get the mesh bag in here and the fruit. So we're ready to go ahead. I got my sanitized mesh bag. We're going to put around this bucket. Now this is where it gets a little tricky. You want to try and make sure this doesn't fall into your bucket, which I seem to have a problem every time I do it. It really should be a 2-person job, but it's just me today. So I'll just slowly add a little bit at a time. And just kind of keep my eye on it. I do have a spoon here. I'll just use my hands. See if I can speed it up a little. You can see how the bag just kind of wants to fall in, but man, if you could smell these bananas, they are like the perfect ripeness. That's exactly what we want. So let's go on to the next step here. So we got our bananas in here. We're ready to cinch this up. So that's what I'm going to do, cinch this up. Now, what I like to do is to make sure no pulp gets out of here. If you watch some of my other videos, I'll use a twist tie. Now again, this twist tie has been sanitized, so no issues there. So that way I know no pulp will at least come out of the top of this. This banana wine, there's going to be pulp that's going to go right through this screen after it ferments for 7 to 10 days. But we're going to get the majority out by this bag, especially for this batch of wine where you have, you know, kind of like a pulpy fruit. Peaches is the same way. You want to get out as much as you can, and I strongly suggest you use a mesh bag for this process. So the mesh bag is in, the fruit is in. Now we got that sugar water that we had on the stove that's been cooled to room temperature. We're just going to add this whole thing to the bucket. Still a little warm, but that's fine. Doesn't have to be totally cooled. A lot of people actually boil their fruit to begin with. So now what we want to do is we got the sugar water in here. I know from this batch of wine and this recipe on this bucket, I'm probably going to get the water level up to this first lip. So I'm not going to take it all the way up there because you want to take readings as you go. You want to watch your potential alcohol. On a wine, fruit wine, you want it anywhere between 9 and 15%. 12 is what I think is ideal. Others may think lower, 9%. Some like it higher, 15%. So I'm going to go about halfway. We'll take a hydrometer reading, and then we'll see exactly where we're at. So we got some water in here. We're not up to where the level I think it's going to be for us to get to about a 12% alcohol. But if you remember, we put all those chemicals at the bottom. So I want to get them stirred in here. And you can see the color will change because of that wine tannin. If you remember, it was kind of brownish. This will look brown for a little while, a few days, but it will dissipate. When this wine's done, it should be about the color of honey. It will be gorgeous. Okay, this is going to be a little bit hard to see, but you can see here, this is the 10% potential alcohol, and here's the 15%. So we want something in between here, a reading, to get the wine to where we want. I'll show you close up that in this part, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to float this right in this bucket and see where it's at. So it's reading about 6%. I'm going to add more water until it's where I want it to be. Right around 12, 13 is what I'm hoping for. So I added another 8 cups. You can see we're getting closer to this rim, but I want to take it slow. There's no rush for this. I don't want it to get too low. But from experience, I'm pretty sure it's going to come right up to that lip with this recipe. But every fruit can be a little different, so you know that's why you just do a little at a time. And one thing to remember, every time I'm taking this in and out, I'm sanitizing this. All right, we're somewhere between 14 and 15, which is pretty good. I'm going to try and get it down a little bit lower, maybe add one more 4 cup and see where it's at. Again, 12, 13 is my shooting range for this batch of wine. So added more water, and I'm going to stir it in. One thing you always want to do, especially when you're stirring this each day while fermentation is happening, make sure you're pushing your fruit down in the wine. You definitely want to keep that fruit moist because you don't want it to spoil or rot or anything. So you can see we're about an inch down from the rim. Let's take another reading. It still says about 14, so I'm going to add water right up to that rim, which is what I kind of expected, and we'll test it again. So there you can see we added more water. Now, one thing I did want to tell you, this is a 6-gallon fermentation bucket. When you're using fruit to make wine, obviously you're putting pulp in there. And that's why you need a 6-gallon bucket, because you're going to take about a gallon of pulp, if not more, depending on the fruit out. So that's why I use a 6-gallon fermentation bucket, because eventually when this is done, I'm probably going to wind up with about a 5-gallon carboy, which is what I'm hoping for. So we're about 13%. I'm going to add a little bit more because I want to get this down a little bit more. I make 14 to 15% batches. This banana wine, I kind of want to take the alcohol level down a little bit. So I'm just going to add a little bit more, try and get it at 12%, and I'll be happy. So I added more water, and you can see I'm right up to this rim, and that's what I suspected is where I'd have to be to get to about 12%. So with experience, you'll figure this out. Again, it's a fun hobby. You know, to say you made your own wine at home and how cheap you're going to make it, that's what it's exciting about this. Still somewhere between about 12 and 13. I might just add a little more and then we'll call it a day, and that's what we'll finish with. So I'll give you a close-up of these readings, but I'm also taking a specific gravity reading, which you can see from this slide, and it's at about a little over 1.09. I have a whole video on how to read a hydrometer and how to figure exactly what your wine's going to come out to. But to do that, you need this beginning reading, and you'll need the end of reading when primary fermentation is done. So check out the video. Any videos I have, I'll put links in the description, but I just want to make sure you know how to use the specific gravity as well, because that's going to be more precise than me just saying it's between 12 and 13%. I just use that as a guideline. So that's it. We're ready to let this sit for 24 hours. We'll then come back and put the yeast in, and we'll also give it a stir. And this thing's going to start bubbling like crazy. I know from experience that banana wine, this bubbler or airlock will go nuts. We won't see that probably for about 48 hours from now after we put the yeast in. But let's get it covered, put the airlock on, and we'll see what it looks like tomorrow. Okay, it's been exactly 24 hours, and we're going to go ahead and add our yeast, our 1 pack of yeast. Now, if you watched a lot of my other videos, you know that I don't mix this into warm water like a lot of the people do. I just sprinkle it on the top, and I find that works best. So first thing we're going to do is give it a stir, push our fruit down. And if you could smell this, it smells like bananas. So here, all we're going to do is wherever it's moist, just dump this in, cover the top. And we don't even stir this in. We're just going to let that go right as is. We'll put the lid back on and we'll check it in 24 hours. I don't know if you can see this, but it's been 24 hours and it's actually already bubbling. Now this thing will get cranking here in the next 24 hours, but we're going to open it up and we're going to give it a stir. So you can see all the foam down in there. That we got a lot of action going here. And this is usually the day that it starts to really smell like yeast. You can really smell it today. So we're going to give it a good stir. Make sure we get that fruit down in there. And we'll cover it back up and we'll check it in another 24 hours. Another day. All right, so we're back to the primary fermentation. This took a long time. This is by far the longest I've had a fermenter go. It was 15 days. You can tell the bubbling is pretty much stopped. We're going to give it a stir, take a hydrometer reading to make sure it's finished, and then we're going to put this into our secondary fermenter. So stay tuned. Let's get into it, see what we got. Remember, I got everything sanitized, paddles sanitized, hydrometer sanitized. And you can see here, it's going to be a beautiful color. It's starting to turn that yellow honey color, which is what we're expecting this to finish as. But you can see there's no foaming. That's how you can kind of tell when it's almost complete. Let's stick the hydrometer in. So we got our hydrometer here sanitized. We're just going to float it in here, and I would suspect it's going to sink pretty much all the way down in there. And that's how I can usually tell when it's done. And you probably can't see this. I'll take a photo so you can see, but it's exactly a 1.00. That's exactly where we want it to be. We're ready. Let's get the carboy sanitized and get this into our secondary. So here we got our setup going. We got the racking cane in our primary fermentation, and we're going to drain it down to our carboy. Now, as we get this liquid down and this starts to go down into the carboy, we don't want to disturb too much of what's in that bag. That's the remaining pulp. We want to get as much out of that as we can in this part of the process. It will prevent extra rackings, and especially it will make your job a lot easier. So here we go. Let's just follow down what we got. We got the tube going down into our carboy, and we're about ready to start to siphon. And if you could smell this wine, you'd be going crazy. So we're ready to go. We're just going to give this a couple quick pumps here, get the siphon going, and you'll see I'm just going to basically let this go. I got it going down into the sanitized carboy. If you're not sure about sanitizing, make sure you're watching my sanitation video. And also I have one on how to use the hydrometer. So we're going to let this go. I'll show you some screens of it going down in here. But it's going to be a great batch of wine. Again, it is time consuming to make banana wine because of the pulp. We may have extra rackings, but let me tell you, it is going to be well worth the wait. Just look at the color in this wine. It's going to be beautiful. So there you go. You can see we got the liquid just about where I wanted. I had to squeeze the bag a little bit where the pulp was being kept just to get enough juice to fill it to that point. So I wanted to kind of show you how much this bag actually saves you. That is all the banana pulp. So keeping it in this bag and using this to pull all that out is saving you so many different rackings and so much time. So I just wanted to kind of show you that. So here it is. I got the airlock on here. We're going to let this sit for about 30 to 45 days before we rack this. FYI, the banana wine will probably take an extra racking than you normally would do because of that fine pulp that's in banana. But let me tell you, when this is done, it's going to be amazing. Make sure this is the end of part one. I'm going to do part two, which will hopefully be the racking, the filtering, and the bottling. We'll wrap it up in the next video of this banana wine series. And also make sure you click that like and subscribe button down here to see more wine videos, more how-to stuff coming down the road. I'm so excited. Talk to you next time for part two of the banana wine.
Slow the road that you're on, keep it going. When the going gets rough, just remember